My parents looked me in the eye and said my sister deserved everything, even the $18 million fortune I had worked so hard to earn. They dismissed my efforts as if I didn't matter, treating me like an afterthought in my own life. For a moment, I felt crushed by their betrayal. But what I did next left them stunned and changed the balance of power forever. You know that moment when a single decision shatters everything you thought you knew about your family? For me, it wasn't just a decision. It was my grandmother's last, defiant act, an $18 million inheritance that ripped open years of hidden resentments, exposed a shocking betrayal, and forced me, Allison Miller, at 31 years old, to finally, powerfully stand up for myself at a dinner table where I was expected to be speechless. I built it. I choose. When my beloved grandmother left me her entire $18 million fortune, I never imagined it would tear my family apart. My parents had always favored my sister Tiffany, but this inheritance? It pushed their preferential treatment to shocking, unbearable new heights. After years of being the responsible daughter, the quiet one who never complained, something inside me finally, irrevocably snapped during that fateful family dinner. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. Growing up, my grandmother, Elaine, was my absolute rock. While my parents were always so busy doting on Tiffany, Grandma saw something in me that no one else did. She lived in this beautiful colonial house, just 3 blocks from our suburban home, and I'd ride my bicycle there almost every single day after school. Her kitchen always smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, and she'd listen to my day's adventures with genuine, captivating interest while baking cookies or preparing dinner. "You know, Allison," she'd say, adjusting her reading glasses as I worked on homework at her kitchen table. "Having a sharp mind is a blessing that will take you places others can't go." She gently tapped my textbook with her flour-dusted finger. "Keep nurturing this gift." The contrast between time with Grandma and time at home was stark, almost painful. At family birthday celebrations, Tiffany would receive these elaborate gifts, expensive dolls, designer clothes, the latest electronics. My parents would just beam with pride as she tore through colorful wrapping paper. My gifts? Always practical. Educational books, sensible clothing, school supplies. "Your sister needs more encouragement," Mom would explain, almost patronizingly, when she caught me staring at Tiffany's new smartphone while I clutched another science encyclopedia. "You're naturally motivated, sweetheart. You understand, right?" I nodded and smiled, pushing down the hurt, the confusion. I did understand in a way. Tiffany struggled with school and making friends. She was dramatic, prone to these emotional outbursts that commanded attention. I was quiet, self-sufficient, with straight A's that my parents acknowledged with distracted nods. In high school, this pattern continued, deepening the divide. When I won the state science competition, my father patted my shoulder and said, "That's nice, honey," before rushing off to Tiffany's dance recital. When I earned a full scholarship to Stanford for computer science, my mother's response was, "That's wonderful, but can we talk about this later? Tiffany's having boyfriend troubles, and she really needs me right now." Through it all, Grandma Elaine celebrated every single achievement. She attended every award ceremony, saved newspaper clippings of my accomplishments in a leather-bound scrapbook, and took me to dinner at fancy restaurants to mark special occasions. "You're going to build something extraordinary someday," she predicted during my college graduation dinner, her eyes twinkling with certainty. "I feel it in these old bones." She was right. After college, I declined offers from major tech companies to pursue my own vision, using the $5,000 Grandma had given me as a graduation gift. I rented a tiny office space and began developing specialized security software for financial institutions. The first 2 years were grueling. 18-hour days. Instant ramen meals. Doubt that crept in during the darkest hours of night, whispering that I'd made a mistake. Meanwhile, Tiffany bounced between careers: retail management, real estate, interior design, fitness instruction. Each new path began with a burst of enthusiasm, and ended with dramatic failure, always followed by parental consolation and financial bailouts. "She's still finding herself," my father would explain, almost sighing, while writing another check to cover her rent after she quit another job. My parents never offered me financial help. "Not that I asked?" "You've always been so responsible with money," my mother would say, as if my independence was a reason to withhold support rather than provide it. By year 3, my company's innovative encryption algorithm caught the attention of 3 major banks. By year 5, I had 30 employees and a downtown office with a view. By year 7, I was turning down acquisition offers in the millions. Grandma visited my office often, marveling at what I'd built. "I knew it," she'd say, running her hand along the sleek conference table. "I always knew you had this in you." Her health began declining that year. Small things at first, forgetting appointments, losing her balance occasionally, calling me by my mother's name. The diagnosis came as a crushing blow: progressive dementia with Parkinson's complications. I immediately hired the best home care team and visited her daily. On her lucid days, we'd sit in her garden drinking tea, and she'd share stories of her youth or dispense wisdom about life and business. "Family is complicated, my darling," she said during one of these afternoons, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for mine. "Blood ties don't always guarantee understanding. Sometimes the people who should love us most see us least clearly. Is that why you never remarried after Grandpa died?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. She smiled mysteriously. "I learned to choose my family wisely. Remember that, Allison. Choose wisely." As her condition worsened, I adjusted my work schedule to spend mornings with her before heading to the office. Tiffany visited occasionally, usually when our parents prompted her. She'd sweep in with store-bought flowers, take selfies with Grandma for social media, and leave within 30 minutes, always with an excuse about an appointment or social engagement. During Grandma's final month, I practically moved into her guest room. We'd watch old movies together, and I'd read to her from her favorite books when her eyes grew too tired. Sometimes she'd grip my hand with surprising strength and say, "You were always the one who saw me. Remember that." The night she passed, I was holding her hand, telling her about a new project at work. She smiled, squeezed my fingers, and whispered, "You'll be all right now. I've made sure of it." By morning, she was gone, slipping away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was elegant and intimate, just as she would have wanted. I delivered the eulogy with tears streaming down my face, sharing stories of her wisdom, kindness, and unwavering support. Tiffany sobbed dramatically in the front row, requiring constant consolation from our parents, despite having barely visited during Grandma's illness. It took everything in me not to point out the performance aspect of her grief, but I knew Grandma would want me to keep the peace. After the service, as we stood receiving condolences from friends and distant relatives, an elderly man I didn't recognize approached me. He introduced himself as Grandma's attorney, expressing his condolences and requesting that the immediate family meet at his office the following day for the reading of the will. I nodded, still numb with grief, not yet understanding how that meeting would forever alter the fabric of our family. The attorney's office was located in a stately brick building downtown. My parents, Tiffany, and I sat in leather chairs arranged in a semicircle before an imposing mahogany desk. Mr. Harrington, Grandma's attorney for over 40 years, adjusted his spectacles as he prepared to read the will. "Before I begin," he said, his voice gentle but formal, "Elaine wanted me to tell you that every decision reflected in this document was made with careful deliberation and a clear mind well before her illness affected her judgment." My father shifted impatiently. "We understand, Harold. Please proceed." What followed was mostly standard: specific jewelry pieces to friends, donations to her favorite charities, her house to be sold and proceeds added to the estate. Then came the revelation that stunned the room into a deafening silence. "The remainder of my estate," Mr. Harrington read, "including all financial assets, investment portfolios, and business holdings, valued at approximately $18 million, I leave to my granddaughter, Allison Miller, who has shown not only remarkable business acumen, but the kind of character and integrity I value most." The silence that followed was truly deafening. My father's face flushed crimson. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Tiffany's mouth hung open in shock. I sat perfectly still, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Grandma's gift and the weight of responsibility it represented. "This is unexpected," my father finally managed, his voice strained. Mr. Harrington nodded sympathetically. "Elaine made this decision 3 years ago and reviewed it annually, including just 2 months before her passing. She was quite adamant about her wishes." Tiffany suddenly burst into tears. "But what about me? She didn't leave me anything." The attorney shuffled through his papers. "Actually, Ms. Tiffany Miller receives your grandmother's collection of vintage brooches and $5,000. $5,000? Tiffany wailed. "When Allison gets $18 million? That's not fair." My mother put her arm around Tiffany's shoulders. "There must be some mistake, Harold. Elaine would never create such an imbalance between the girls. I assure you, Mrs. Miller, there is no mistake, Mr. Harrington replied firmly. Elaine was of sound mind and very specific about her wishes. The drive home was tense and silent. That evening, my parents insisted on a family dinner to discuss the situation. I arrived at their suburban home to find Tiffany red-eyed but combative, and my parents wearing identical expressions of concerned disappointment over Mother's pot roast, a dish usually reserved for special occasions. Tiffany launched her offensive. I just don't understand why Grandma would do this. We were close, too. Remember how she used to take me shopping? I bit my tongue, recalling how those rare shopping trips had been my mother's idea, not Grandma's. Sweetheart, my father addressed me, cutting his meat with precise movements. You know, your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly in her final years. Mr. Harrington said she made this decision 3 years ago and reviewed it regularly. I pointed out. She knew exactly what she was doing. Even so, my mother interjected, a practiced sweetness in her tone. Family takes care of family. Surely you don't intend to keep everything for yourself when your sister could benefit from her fair share. Fair share? I repeated, setting down my fork, a tremor of disbelief running through me. Tiffany barely visited Grandma during her illness. I was busy, Tiffany protested, as if that excused everything. Besides, you were always her favorite. You had her all to yourself for years. My father raised his hand to silence us both. The point is, Allison, that this inheritance should benefit the whole family. Your sister has been struggling to find her footing. This could give her the fresh start she needs. I felt a growing unease. What exactly are you suggesting? We think splitting it equally would be the right thing to do, my mother stated, as if the matter was already decided. $9 million each. Perfect fairness. I stared at them, stunned by the sheer audacity. Grandma specifically left it to me. Because you manipulated her, Tiffany accused, tears welling again. You were always there, whispering in her ear, turning her against me. That's not true, I protested, feeling heat rise to my face. Regardless, my father cut in, his voice hardening. This is about what's right for the family. Your sister has plans, dreams that this money could make possible. Tiffany immediately brightened. I've always wanted to open a boutique, and I found the perfect property downtown. It only costs $800,000, and I need a new car. Oh, and I could finally buy that condo in Aspen for weekend getaways. I listened in disbelief as she continued listing expensive purchases she'd already mentally made with my inheritance. More disturbing was how my parents nodded encouragingly, as if her spending spree was perfectly reasonable. Later that week, my college friend Rachel met me for coffee. As I recounted the situation, her expression grew increasingly alarmed. Allison, do you hear yourself? They're trying to guilt you into giving away $9 million. That's not normal family behavior. Maybe I should give Tiffany something, I said uncertainly. Family is important. Rachel reached across the table and gripped my hand. Listen to me. Your grandmother specifically chose you for a reason. She watched how you built your business from nothing while your sister bounced between jobs. She saw who visited her during her illness. Trust her judgment. The next day, I received a call from my mother. Tiffany's in a bit of a situation, she began hesitantly. She may have already put deposits down on some things, assuming you'd be generous. What kinds of things? I asked, already dreading the answer. Well, the boutique's lease. And she's ordered inventory. And put a down payment on a condo. Nothing excessive, just about $300,000 altogether. I nearly dropped the phone. $300,000? Without even talking to me first? She was excited, my mother defended. And honestly, we all assumed you'd do the right thing. After hanging up, I drove to Grandma's house, now empty, but not yet on the market. I still had the key, and I needed to feel close to her. In her study, I found her collection of leather-bound journals. I'd known she kept them, but had never read them out of respect for her privacy. Now, something compelled me to open the most recent one. What I found was illuminating. Detailed accounts of her visits with both Tiffany and me. Observations about family dynamics. And more shocking, notes about private conversations with my parents where they had apparently discussed Grandma's money, openly making plans for how Tiffany would use it after she inevitably received a substantial inheritance. One entry from 2 years ago read, Robert and Catherine visited today, bringing up financial planning again. They continue to assume Tiffany will receive the bulk of my estate, suggesting I should make things easier by setting up trusts. When I mentioned Allison's impressive business growth, Catherine quickly changed the subject. They've always had blind spots where their daughters are concerned, seeing Tiffany's needs while taking Allison's strength for granted. I've made my decision, though they won't like it. The next evening, I confronted my parents directly. Did you promise Tiffany she would get Grandma's money? They exchanged glances. We may have given her the impression she would be well provided for. My father admitted carefully. We always assumed your grandmother would divide things equally. My mother added. Or even favor Tiffany since you have your successful business. So you've been planning how to spend Grandma's money before she even died? I asked, disgusted. Don't be melodramatic, Allison. My father scolded. Family financial planning is perfectly normal. I left their house that night with a growing, sickening realization that what I had always interpreted as Tiffany simply being the favorite child was something deeper and more troubling. It wasn't just that they loved her more. They fundamentally believed she was entitled to more simply because she had always needed more. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next few weeks. Tiffany began calling extended family members, portraying herself as the victim of my greed and callousness. Suddenly, aunts, uncles, and cousins who rarely contacted me were blowing up my phone with concerned messages. Families should support each other. Texted Aunt Linda, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Your grandmother would be so disappointed in your selfishness. Wrote Uncle Paul, who had borrowed money from Grandma twice and never repaid her. My mother's sister Carol called one evening. Sweetie, I know it's not my place, but your mother is absolutely devastated. She raised you to be generous and kind. What happened to that little girl? Each interaction followed the same infuriating pattern. I was selfish for following my grandmother's explicit wishes, while Tiffany was justified in expecting a windfall she had done nothing to earn. The pressure from my parents intensified. They alternated between guilt-tripping, emotional manipulation, and occasional bursts of anger. My mother would call crying, saying she couldn't sleep from worry about Tiffany's future. My father sent stern emails about family responsibility and moral obligations. Remember when you were 10 and Tiffany let you borrow her roller skates? My mother reminisced during one call. She's always been so generous with you. I had to stifle a laugh at the absurdity. One childhood instance of sibling sharing was apparently equivalent to handing over $9 million. The situation triggered memories of similar patterns throughout my childhood. When we were teenagers, Tiffany had borrowed my laptop without permission and spilled soda on it, destroying it completely. Instead of making her replace it, my parents had insisted I forgive her because she already feels bad enough and she needs the computer for school, too. I ended up working extra shifts at my part-time job to save for a new one. On another occasion, Tiffany had taken my prom dress without asking, tearing it at the party. When I got upset, my parents had scolded me for being materialistic and insensitive to your sister's feelings. I wore a hastily purchased backup dress that I hated, while Tiffany faced no consequences. Now, as an adult, I recognized the same pattern playing out on a much larger, more destructive scale. Things escalated further when I visited Grandma's house to collect some personal mementos before the property sold. Tiffany had apparently been there first. The antique music box Grandma had promised me was missing, along with several family photographs. Most heartbreaking, the handwritten book of recipes Grandma had created for me was gone. When confronted, Tiffany claimed innocence at first, then admitted taking the items, but insisted she had just as much right to them as I did. When I specifically asked about the recipe book, with my name literally written on the cover, she became defensive. I took cooking classes last year, so I'll actually use these recipes. You're always working. When would you even cook? A week later, Tiffany accidentally knocked over and broke the crystal butterfly Grandma had given me on my 16th birthday, one of the few keepsakes I'd managed to secure. She offered a flippant apology as I carefully gathered the shattered pieces, fighting back tears. Meanwhile, I discovered something alarming from my consultation with the financial advisor handling the estate transfer. My parents had co-signed on several of Tiffany's loans, a car lease, credit cards, and most significantly, a personal loan of $250,000 for her latest business idea that had quickly failed. They had apparently been counting on the inheritance to clear these debts. When I questioned them about this, my father became defensive. We were helping your sister establish herself. We assumed once the inheritance came through, everything would be settled. So, you spent Grandma's money before she even died? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Money she chose to leave to me? Don't be dramatic, Allison. My mother sighed. We simply helped Tiffany with the understanding that the family would be provided for eventually. The pressure reached a breaking point when Tiffany showed up at my office unannounced one afternoon, creating a scene in front of my employees and clients. She was wearing expensive new clothes and carrying a designer bag I recognized as costing thousands. We need to talk about my money, she demanded loudly in the reception area. I quickly ushered her into my private office, mortified. Lower your voice! And it's not your money, Tiffany. It should be, she cried, pacing dramatically. Do you know how embarrassing it is? I've already told everyone about opening my boutique. I've made commitments, financial commitments, based on money that isn't yours. You're just being spiteful, she accused. You've always been jealous of me because Mom and Dad love me more. The comment stung, despite its childishness. This isn't about who Mom and Dad love more, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. This is about respecting Grandma's wishes. Grandma was senile, Tiffany shouted. Everyone knows that. After she left, I sat at my desk, hands shaking. The confrontation had been witnessed by several employees, and I could feel their concerned glances through the glass walls of my office. My assistant quietly brought me tea and closed the blinds to give me privacy. That night I barely slept. The constant stress was taking a physical toll, anxiety attacks, insomnia, headaches. I'd lost weight, and colleagues had commented on my exhaustion. After tossing and turning until 3 a.m., I made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Melissa Chen listened carefully as I detailed the family dynamics and current situation. After our second session, she offered her professional assessment. What you're describing, Allison, is a classic family system with rigid roles. You were assigned the role of the responsible one, while your sister was the needy one. These roles become self-reinforcing over time. Breaking them feels like betraying the family's fundamental operating system. So what do I do? I asked, desperate for guidance. You're already doing it, she replied gently, recognizing the pattern and questioning whether you want to continue participating in it. The question now is, what boundaries do you need to set for your own well-being? That evening, I returned to Grandma's house with new purpose. I systematically went through her remaining papers and discovered an envelope addressed to me, tucked inside her favorite novel. The letter inside was written in her characteristic, elegant script, dated just 3 months before her death. My dearest Allison, it began. If you're reading this, I've passed on and you've discovered what I've left to you. I imagine this has created quite the stir in the family. Your parents and sister have specific expectations that I've chosen not to fulfill, and they won't accept this easily. I'm not leaving you this legacy to create family discord, though that may be an unfortunate side effect. I'm leaving it to you because I've watched you build something from nothing through intelligence, persistence, and integrity. You understand the value of money because you've earned your success dollar by dollar. Your sister has been given much but has earned little. Giving her more would only reinforce patterns that have hindered her growth. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for those we love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Stand firm, my darling girl. You may face pressure, manipulation, even anger from those who should support you most. Remember that true love doesn't create obligation or indebtedness. It doesn't demand sacrifices that diminish the one making them. Whatever you decide regarding your inheritance, make sure the decision comes from your wisdom, not from guilt or obligation. I trust you completely. All my love, Grandma. I clutched the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I felt Grandma's presence so strongly. It was as if she were sitting beside me, her hand on my shoulder, giving me permission to break free from patterns that had defined our family for generations. My newfound resolution was immediately tested. That very night, my parents called with their most aggressive ultimatum yet. We've tried to be patient, my father said, his voice cold, hard. But this has gone on long enough. Either you agree to split the inheritance equally with your sister, or you're no longer part of this family. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. In the background, I could hear my mother crying softly and Tiffany's voice urging them to stay strong. I need time to think, I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. 1 week, my father declared. Then we expect your answer. The right answer. The final breaking point came 3 days after my parents' ultimatum. I had gone to my grandmother's house to pack the last of her personal items before the property sale finalized. In her bedroom, I found a framed photograph I'd been searching for, Grandma and me at my college graduation, both of us beaming with pride. It was one of the last photos taken before her illness began to show. As I carefully wrapped it in tissue paper, Tiffany burst into the room. She'd apparently been watching the house, waiting for me to arrive. "Still hoarding all her stuff, too?" she accused, gesturing wildly. "God, you're so selfish." "I'm taking the things that were specifically left to me," I replied, trying to maintain calm. "There's a detailed inventory with Mr. Harrington." "Whatever. Mom and Dad sent me to get your answer." "Time's up. They said I had a week." "Well, they changed their minds. They need to know now so they can figure out what to do about the loans." I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. My beautiful sister with her perfect highlights and manicured nails, wearing clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, demanding money she hadn't earned as if it were her birthright. "What loans specifically, Tiffany?" I asked quietly. She rolled her eyes. "You know, the usual stuff. My car, credit cards, the business loan. Oh, and they helped me put a down payment on a condo last month." "A new condo? During all this?" "Well, yeah, I found the perfect place. And they said not to worry because you'd obviously do the right thing eventually." She reached for the framed photo in my hands. "This should really go to Mom anyway. She's her daughter." As she grabbed the frame, the glass cracked, spiderwebbing across my grandmother's smiling face. Something inside me cracked, too. All the years of being the good daughter, the understanding sister, the one who never made waves, never demanded attention, never asked for what she truly deserved. "No." The word came out softly at first, then louder, firmer. "No. This stops now." Tiffany blinked, startled by my tone. "What?" I said. "No, I'm not giving you half the inheritance. I'm not paying off your loans. I'm not funding your boutique or your condo or your car or any other thing you think you're entitled to without working for it." "You can't be serious," she scoffed. "Mom and Dad will disown you." "Then that's their choice," I said, surprising myself with how little the threat suddenly affected me. "But I'm done being the family ATM while simultaneously being treated as less important, less deserving, less loved." I carefully set down the broken frame and faced my sister directly. "Let's have this out once and for all. Call Mom and Dad. Tell them to meet us at my house tonight at 7 o'clock. I'll have my final answer then." Tiffany must have heard something different in my voice because for once she didn't argue. She just nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. I spent the afternoon in intense preparation, consulting with my financial advisor, speaking with Mr. Harrington about the legal protections already in place for the inheritance, and finally meeting with my therapist for an emergency session to prepare emotionally for the confrontation ahead. "Remember, you can't control their reactions," Dr. Chen cautioned. "You can only control your own behavior and boundaries." At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my parents and Tiffany standing together, a united front. My father looked stern, my mother anxious, and Tiffany triumphant, clearly expecting me to cave under the combined pressure. I led them to the living room where I'd arranged chairs facing each other. Once everyone was seated, I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you for coming. I've made my decision about the inheritance. But before I share it, there are some things I need to say." "Allison," my father interrupted, impatient. "Please let me finish," I said firmly. "For 20 years, I've watched as Tiffany received preferential treatment in every aspect of our family life. Better gifts, more attention, more support, more forgiveness, more everything." "That's not true," my mother protested. "It is true," I countered, my voice gaining strength. "When I was 12, I won the regional spelling bee. You didn't attend because Tiffany had a dance recital the same day. When I graduated valedictorian, Dad left halfway through my speech because Tiffany called, upset about a breakup. When I launched my company, either of you came to the opening because you were helping Tiffany move after her third failed job in 2 years." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Your sister has always needed more support. You were always so independent." "I became independent because I had to be," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "No one was going to catch me if I fell. So, I learned never to fall. Meanwhile, Tiffany never had to learn responsibility because you were always there to clean up her messes." "That's so unfair," Tiffany cried. You have no idea how hard my life has been. Hard how, exactly? I asked. You've never paid your own rent. You've never held a job longer than 8 months. You've never had a loan denied or a credit card declined because mom and dad always bail you out. We help both our daughters. My mother insisted weakly. When was the last time you helped me with anything? I challenged. When was the last time you even asked if I needed help? The silence that followed was telling. The truth is, I continued more gently now, you've always seen Tiffany as fragile and me as strong. So you gave her everything and me nothing, assuming I'd be fine. And I was fine. I built a life and a business I'm proud of. But that doesn't make it right or fair. So, this is revenge? My father asked, his voice hardening. Keeping the money to punish us? No, I said. This is me respecting Grandma's wishes and refusing to enable patterns that hurt everyone, including Tiffany. Don't pretend this is for my benefit. Tiffany snapped. But it is, I insisted. What happens when the money runs out? Then what? You've never developed skills to support yourself. You've never built confidence from overcoming challenges. Grandma understood that giving you money would only continue the cycle. My mother began to cry softly. My father put his arm around her but kept his eyes on me, his expression dark. I should have known you'd be this way, he said. Your grandmother filled your head with her ideas about earning your way and standing on your own 2 feet. That might have worked in her day, but family takes care of family now. Family should support growth, not dependency. I replied. And speaking of family taking care of family, Tiffany mentioned you've taken out new loans recently, expecting me to cover them. My parents exchanged guilty glances. We may have made some financial decisions based on certain expectations. My father admitted stiffly. Like co-signing Tiffany's loans, helping her buy a condo last month, even while this inheritance was in dispute. We had faith you'd do the right thing. My mother burst out. The right thing according to whom? I asked. Because Grandma made her wishes very clear. She left her money to me because she trusted my judgment about how to use it. She was manipulated. Tiffany shouted, jumping to her feet. You turned her against me. You always were her favorite. I visited her every day during her illness. I said quietly, firmly. Where were you? I was busy. Not everyone can drop everything for months like you. I didn't drop everything. I ran a company while caring for her. I made choices about my priorities, just like you did. My father stood abruptly. Enough of this. What's your decision, Allison? Are you sharing the inheritance equally as we've asked, or not? I looked at each of their faces. My father's angry, my mother's tearful manipulation, my sister's entitled expectation. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity the dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. No, I said simply. I will not be sharing the inheritance equally. Grandma left it to me, and I intend to honor her wishes by using it responsibly. Tiffany let out a wail of outrage. My father's face flushed dark red. Then you're no longer part of this family, he declared. Don't call us. Don't visit. Don't expect to be included in holidays or family events. My mother gasped, but didn't contradict him. Tiffany looked momentarily shocked before her expression transformed to vindictive satisfaction. I had anticipated this reaction, had prepared myself for it, but the finality still hit like a physical blow. Yet, alongside the pain, was something unexpected, a sense of relief, of burdens lifting, of chains breaking. I understand, I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. I've already made arrangements with Mr. Harrington. The inheritance transfer will be complete next week. I'll have no further contact as you've requested. You'll regret this, my father warned as they moved toward the door. When you're all alone with your money, you'll realize what you've thrown away. I'm not throwing away family, I replied. I'm refusing to be exploited by the people who should love me most. As the door closed behind them, I sank onto the sofa, allowing the tears to finally come. I cried for the family I thought I had. For the love I'd always sought but never fully received. For the little girl who had tried so hard to be good enough. But even through the tears, I felt something new taking root. A certainty that I had done the right thing, not just for me, but for all of us. The weeks following the confrontation were both the most difficult and most liberating of my life. True to their word, my parents and Tiffany cut off all communication. The extended family largely followed suit, with a few exceptions. A cousin who quietly reached out to express support. An elderly great-aunt who called to say she'd had similar issues with her own sister decades ago. I threw myself into constructive action. First, I assembled a team of trusted advisors, my existing financial planner, a philanthropy consultant, and a therapist specializing in family estrangement. Together, we crafted a comprehensive plan for the inheritance that honored both my grandmother's values and my own. The key, explained Diane, my financial advisor, is creating structures that align with your principles while protecting these assets long-term. With their guidance, I established the Elaine Miller Foundation, dedicating $3 million to educational scholarships for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation would provide not just financial support, but mentorship programs and business development resources, the kind of comprehensive support I had built my company without. I allocated another significant portion toward expanding my business, with plans to create 50 new jobs over the next 3 years. The remainder I invested across diversified portfolios, with a portion set aside for personal security and future philanthropic projects. 1. Decision was particularly difficult. Despite everything, I couldn't completely abandon my sister's future. Working with lawyers, I established a modest educational trust for any children Tiffany might eventually have. They shouldn't suffer for the dysfunction between their mother and aunt. As the legal work finalized and my grandmother's estate officially transferred, I felt a growing need for closure. After much consideration, I decided to invite my family to a formal dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. My invitation, sent via courier to ensure receipt, was carefully worded. I would like to share my plans for grandmother's legacy and offer one final opportunity for reconciliation before our paths fully diverge. This dinner represents my sincere wish for peace between us, regardless of our differences. To my surprise, they accepted. Perhaps curiosity overcame resentment. Or maybe they hoped I'd had a change of heart about the money. Whatever their reasons, reservations were made for a private dining room at L'Amiens, a French restaurant known for its understated elegance and discretion. I arrived early, overseeing the final arrangements. The table was set with delicate china and crystal, fresh flowers arranged in subtle centerpieces. At each place setting, I'd placed small, thoughtfully chosen gifts, a first edition of my father's favorite novel, an antique brooch reminiscent of one my mother had admired in a museum once, and for Tiffany, a beautiful leather portfolio embossed with her initials. When they arrived, the atmosphere was tense but civil. My mother kissed my cheek hesitantly while my father offered a stiff nod. Tiffany barely made eye contact. We sat through appetizers with minimal conversation, mostly commenting on the food and weather. As the main course was served, my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. So, Allison, your invitation mentioned sharing your plans for the inheritance. I took a sip of water, centering myself. Yes. I wanted you to know that grandmother's legacy will be honored in ways that reflect her values and create positive impact. I outlined the foundation, explaining how it would help young people with drive and vision but limited resources. I described my business expansion and the jobs it would create. Finally, I mentioned the educational trust for Tiffany's future children. These decisions weren't made to hurt anyone, I concluded. They were made to create lasting good from grandmother's generosity. The silence that followed was profound. My mother stared at her plate. My father's expression remained unreadable. Then, Tiffany slammed her fork down. So that's it? Some charity that isn't even named after me and a trust for kids I don't even have yet? What about what I need now? The foundation is named after grandmother, who earned the money, I said quietly. And the trust is to ensure your children have educational opportunities regardless of circumstances. This is just another way of controlling me, Tiffany cried, making herself sound small and victimized. You've always thought you were better than me. That's not true, I said. I've always wanted us to be equals, but equality doesn't mean I give you half of everything I have or earn. My father pushed his plate away. I don't know what we expected. You've made your position clear, Allison. You value money over family. That's unfair, I replied, maintaining composure. I've used this inheritance to honor grandmother and create opportunities for others. How is that valuing money over family? Because your sister needs that money, he exclaimed, his voice rising. Her business ventures haven't succeeded yet, but with proper funding. Dad, I interrupted gently. Tiffany has had proper funding multiple times. You and Mom have supported every venture. The results have been consistent. You think you're so perfect? Tiffany shouted, drawing concerned glances from the waitstaff. With your fancy company and your perfect life, you have no idea what it's like to struggle. I built my company from $5,000 and worked 18-hour days for years, I reminded her. I do know about struggle. The difference is I persisted through it instead of expecting bailouts. My father stood abruptly. This dinner was a mistake. Come on, Catherine. Tiffany, we're leaving. My mother hesitated, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. For a moment, I thought she might stay. Might finally see this situation clearly. Then Tiffany tugged her arm, and she rose obediently. Wait, I said, reaching into my bag. There's one more thing. I handed each of them an envelope. These are copies of grandmother's journal entries from her last years. I thought you might want to understand her thinking. My father shoved the envelope in his pocket without looking at it. Tiffany crumpled hers and left it on the table, but my mother carefully placed hers in her purse, her fingers lingering on the sealed edge. As my father and Tiffany stormed toward the exit, my mother paused beside me. Was she in pain? At the end? She asked softly. No, I assured her. She was at peace. She knew she was loved. My mother nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I'm glad you were with her. Then she hurried after my father and sister, leaving me alone at the elegant table. The maitre d' approached discreetly. Is everything all right, Ms. Miller? Yes, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. Everything is exactly as it needs to be. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months. The dinner hadn't gone as I'd hoped, but it had provided something essential, clarity. I had extended an olive branch, offered transparency, and even provided for future generations. What happened next was beyond my control. In the morning, I found an unexpected text from my mother. I read some of the journal last night. I never realized how much she saw. I need time to think. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. A tiny crack in the wall of estrangement. A small ray of light suggesting that perhaps one day healing might be possible. In the months that followed, I embraced the freedom of living authentically, without constantly seeking approval I would never receive. The foundation launched with a celebration attended by community leaders, educational partners, and the first cohort of scholarship recipients, 20 young entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas and limited resources. One recipient, a young woman developing affordable medical technology for rural communities, approached me at the reception. I was ready to give up, she confessed. No one believed in my vision except me. This isn't just funding. It's validation that my ideas matter. Her words echoed so closely what my grandmother had provided for me that tears sprang to my eyes. That's exactly the point, I told her. Sometimes all we need is one person who sees our potential. My business expansion proceeded ahead of schedule. We acquired 2 smaller security firms, integrated their teams into our culture, and created 35 new positions in the first quarter alone. The company's value increased substantially, validating my decision to invest a portion of the inheritance in growing what I had built. The family estrangement continued largely as expected. My father maintained strict silence. Tiffany occasionally sent hostile texts when intoxicated, which I chose not to engage with. The extended family divided along predictable lines, with most siding with my parents out of either obligation or ignorance of the full situation. The surprise was my mother. 2 months after the dinner, she asked to meet for coffee. We chose a quiet cafe midway between our homes, neutral territory for a tentative reconnection. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, clutching her purse on her lap like a shield. I've read all of your grandmother's journals, she began without preamble. Twice. I waited, giving her space to continue. She saw things so clearly, my mother said softly. Things I didn't want to see about our family, about how we treated you compared to your sister. It wasn't always easy, I acknowledged. It wasn't fair, she corrected, her voice stronger. Your father and I, we fell into patterns without questioning them. Tiffany needed more, so we gave her more. And you needed less, so we gave you less. Except that wasn't really true, was it? You just asked for less because you knew that's all you'd get. The accuracy of her assessment stunned me. Something like that, I admitted. I'm not ready to fully break from your father and sister, she continued. But I wanted you to know I understand why your grandmother made the choice she did, and I don't blame you for honoring it. It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was a start. my mother beginning to see the family dynamics clearly for perhaps the first time. We began meeting monthly, careful conversations, gradually building a new kind of relationship based on truth rather than obligation or manipulation. The holidays arrived, my first without family gatherings. I had anticipated loneliness, but instead found unexpected joy in new traditions. I hosted a Thanksgiving dinner for employees who couldn't travel home, volunteered at a community kitchen on Christmas Eve, and spent New Year's Eve with Rachel and other close friends who had supported me throughout the ordeal. To boundaries and brave new beginnings, Rachel toasted as we watched fireworks from her rooftop terrace. And to chosen family, I added, looking around at the people who had stood by me, not out of obligation, but genuine care. 6 months after the inheritance transfer, I unexpectedly encountered Tiffany at a charity auction. She was with a group of fashionable women, laughing too loudly, jewelry glinting under the ballroom lights. When she spotted me, her smile faltered briefly before she excused herself from her companions and approached. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, voice slightly slurred from champagne. "Showing off how generous you are with Grandma's money? The foundation is sponsoring a table," I explained calmly. "We support their youth programs." She glanced around furtively before leaning closer. "Things aren't great, just so you know. Dad had to remortgage their house to cover the loans. He won't admit it was for me, but it was." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "That must be difficult for everyone. Mom's different lately," she continued, studying my reaction. "Quieter. She's been talking about getting a part-time job, which is ridiculous at her age. It's never too late to find fulfillment in work," I suggested. "It might be good for her." Tiffany snorted. "That's rich coming from you. Anyway, I just thought you should know what your selfishness has done to the family." As she walked away, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for my parents' financial strain, concern for my mother's subtle rebellion against established patterns, and most surprisingly, hope that difficult consequences might eventually lead to healthier dynamics for everyone. The following week, I received a call from Mr. Harrington. "I thought you should know," he said carefully. "Your parents have approached me asking if there's any legal way to contest the will at this late stage." "Is there?" I asked, surprisingly calm despite the revelation. "No. The time for contest has long passed, and the estate has been properly transferred. But their inquiry suggests continued difficulties." After hanging up, I took a moment to reflect on what this meant. 6 months later, they were still looking for ways to access the money rather than adapting to its absence. The patterns ran deeper than I had realized. That evening, I found myself drawn again to my grandmother's house, now sold, but still occasionally visited in memory. Standing on the sidewalk outside, I remembered her words from that final letter. "Stand firm, my darling girl. I am Grandma," I whispered to the twilight air. "I am." The 6-month milestone provided an opportunity for reflection. In half a year, I had established a foundation that was already changing lives, expanded my business, creating new jobs, and begun the painful but necessary process of redefining family relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The journey hadn't been easy, but standing on the other side of the hardest decisions, I felt an overwhelming certainty that my grandmother had been right. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for those we love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices, even when those choices hurt us both. 1 year after receiving my inheritance, I held a small celebration at the foundation headquarters. We showcased projects from our first cohort of entrepreneurs, awarded the next round of scholarships, and unveiled a portrait of my grandmother in the main conference room. "Elaine Miller believed in earning your success," I told the gathered guests. "But she also believed in extending a hand to those climbing upward. This foundation embodies that balance: support without enablement, opportunity without entitlement." As the event concluded, I checked my phone to find a surprising message: an invitation to dinner at my parents' home the following weekend. The message from my mother included a note. "It's time to talk as a family. Your father and sister have agreed. Please come." I spent the week considering whether to accept. My therapist cautioned realistic expectations. "People rarely change fundamentally," she reminded me. "But sometimes difficult circumstances create space for growth." After careful consideration, I decided to attend, but with clear boundaries. I would listen openly, but wouldn't compromise my values or reopen discussions about the inheritance. When I arrived at the familiar suburban house, I was struck by subtle changes. The living room furniture had been rearranged. Family photos updated. My mother's art supplies set up in a corner that had previously held my father's recliner. Small shifts suggesting larger ones beneath the surface. My father greeted me with restrained politeness, neither warm nor hostile. Tiffany arrived late, her appearance noticeably less polished than usual. Simpler clothes, minimal makeup, hair pulled back practically. My mother seemed simultaneously nervous and determined as she served a modest meal that she'd clearly prepared herself rather than catered. The conversation began cautiously. Surface updates about work and health, careful navigation around potentially contentious topics. Then, after dessert was served, my mother straightened her shoulders and addressed the elephant in the room. "We asked you here because things have changed," she began. "The past year has been difficult for all of us in different ways." My father nodded stiffly. "The financial situation became untenable. We had to make significant adjustments." "What your father means," my mother clarified, "is that we've sold the vacation property, downsized our lifestyle, and he's postponed retirement. The loans for Tiffany's ventures created obligations we couldn't sustain." Tiffany studied her plate intently. "I'm working at an actual job now," she said, a note of defensive pride in her voice. "Assistant manager at Bellamy's boutique. 6 months next week." "That's great," I said sincerely. "Retail management suits your people skills." "It's not what I pictured," she admitted. "But it's steady, and I'm learning the business from the inside instead of trying to start at the top." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Your sister has also moved back home temporarily to save money. We're helping her develop a structured plan to address her debts." The irony wasn't lost on me. They were finally teaching Tiffany financial responsibility after a lifetime of enabling dependency. Necessity had accomplished what choice had not. "I'm glad to hear you're finding stability," I said carefully. "That's important." My mother reached over to touch my hand lightly. "I've been seeing a counselor," she revealed. "She's helping me understand some patterns in our family that weren't healthy for any of us." My father shifted uncomfortably but didn't contradict her. "I'm not saying everything is fixed," my mother continued. "Your father and I still have different perspectives on many things. Tiffany is still finding her way, but we're trying to be more honest with ourselves and each other." "I appreciate that," I said. "And I appreciate you inviting me tonight. We've seen what you've done with the foundation," my father said abruptly. "The articles in the business journal, the scholarship recipients. It's impressive." Coming from him, this qualified as effusive praise. I nodded acknowledgement. "I still think I deserve some of that money," Tiffany interjected, old entitlement flaring briefly. "But," she added after catching our mother's warning glance, "I guess I'm learning there's a difference between deserving something and earning it." It wasn't a complete transformation, that would have been unrealistic after decades of established patterns, but it was movement, small steps toward healthier dynamics. As I prepared to leave, my mother walked me to the door. "We're not asking for money," she said quietly. "I want to be clear about that. We're finding our own way through this, but I would like to have my daughter back in my life if that's possible." "I'd like that too," I said, surprised by the emotion welling in my throat. "On new terms, with clear boundaries." "I understand," she nodded. Baby steps. Driving home, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The inheritance had been about much more than money. It had been my grandmother's final gift of freedom. Freedom from patterns that had limited all of us. Freedom to create new relationships based on respect rather than obligation. Freedom to define family on my own terms. The next morning, I visited my grandmother's grave, bringing her favorite yellow roses and a heart full of gratitude. "You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" I said softly to the marble marker. "The money was just a catalyst for changes that needed to happen." I sat on the small bench beside her plot, watching sunlight filter through nearby trees. "The foundation is thriving, the business is growing, and the family, well, that's complicated, but maybe heading in a better direction. Not because I gave them what they wanted, but because I didn't." A gentle breeze rustled the flowers I brought, yellow petals dancing in the morning light. "You taught me that true love doesn't diminish the one giving it. That boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary for genuine relationship. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stand firm in our truth, even when those closest to us don't understand." As I prepared to leave, I placed my hand on the cool stone. The greatest inheritance wasn't the money, Grandma. It was learning that my worth isn't determined by others' approval. That lesson has changed everything. Walking back to my car, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, and some relationships would never be what I once hoped. But I had found something more valuable. Authentic connection with those who truly saw me. Freedom from toxic patterns. And the confidence to create boundaries that protected my well-being. The inheritance had been a catalyst, but the real transformation came from within. Choosing self-respect over approval-seeking, authenticity over accommodation, and truth over comfortable illusions. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones most worth having. And the most painful boundaries are the ones most necessary for growth.